Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, we will be looking at arrays in PHP. Now, up until this point, we have been looking at variables, which we defined as storage spaces for values or some form of content such that we didn't have to retype this content over and over again. Now, a variable is more like a singular space, meaning that if you change the value of the variable one time, it can only store one value at a time, so to speak. Now, an array is like an extension of a variable where we can store multiple values inside of one variable-like structure. Now, to get things started off, as usual, we create a new file, array.php, as we already have the link there. And I'm just going to go ahead and create that file. And then we go ahead and spin up our HTML5 template. Then we go ahead and change the title to what we know is the standard PHP primer-arrays. And then we put in our h1 tags for our arrays notification. And then we get our hands dirty. Now, I did start off this lesson by saying, that we have a new construct called an array, which is similar to a variable. Now, we've seen variables where we declared maybe num, and then we could say is equal to 3. But what if you needed to store more than one numbers and you didn't want to have a variable per number? Because if we wanted 10 numbers, then we would have to probably start saying num1, num2, num3, num4, and storing them all in each variable. But then an array allows us to use one variable and store many values. So I'm going to just comment this and say this is a variable. And then underneath that, I'm going to comment and say this is an array. And then I'm going to declare an array by saying numbers. So it looks just like an array declaration or a variable declaration initially, but then we say equals array and then open parentheses, and then inside these parentheses we add as many values as we want to. So I did say numbers, so I'm going to add each number, and it is comma separated, so I'm going to add numbers 1 through 10. And so what we have here is an array of numbers 1 through 10. All right, so we can have an array of values, and this is what we call a homogeneous array, meaning only one type is being stored. Now, in most programming languages, that is the norm, but in PHP, they actually allow us to store more than one types of values or types of data. So we know we have string for text, we have numbers, and we have, decimal places. Other programming languages are more strict, but in PHP, you can store almost any combination if you want. So in this case, we're only storing numerals, so I'm calling it a homogeneous array. So now that we have established an array, what if we only wanted to print one of the numbers at a time? Now, an array is numbered from 0 to n being the number of values in that array. So in this situation, the subscript, as we call it, would be 0 for the number 1, 1 for the number 2, etc. So at this point, it's always minus 1. But the fact is that regardless of the data type or whatever it is you're storing in said array, the first one is always 0 and the last one is always n minus 1, where n is the total number of values in said array. So if I wanted to print any one of these values, just the value, not all of the values, I could echo and I would call my array, which is called numbers. So it's the same construct as printing a variable, except I have multiple values. So I want to specify the value I want, then I have to know which number it is in the array. So if I wanted to print the number 6, since we're starting from 0, it would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I print the subscript 5 and I get the subscript by using my square brackets next to the name of my array. So my array is numbers. So I put echo numbers and then open and close square brackets. And inside of these square brackets, I put the number of the array that I want to print, right? So that's a subscript, that's the location, the position, however you need to term it. It just means that I can find the value I'm interested in at this position in the array. And remember, once again, it starts at 0 and ends at n minus 1. So I want to print the number 6. It would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 minus 1, because this was really 0. All right. So if I do that and then I browse to the page, then we see where I am printing the value 6, which is indeed in the 5th position of my array because I started counting at 0. Now I can repeat this with any other subscript that I want. So I'm just going to echo another line, and this time I'm going to put it in a p tag. So I'm going to just put the variable or the reference to the array and subscript inside of quotation marks so that I can get that interpolation. And I'm going to put it in a p tag. And I'm going to change the subscript. I want to print the last value. So like I said, it's n minus 1. So I have 10 items. So 10 being n minus 1 would be 9. And then if I refresh this, I see I have 6 being printed first and then the number 10 being printed after. And other cool things you can do with an array is to find the size. So let's just say I wanted to know how many elements are in my array, and I'm going to just put in some other random values. So I'm just expanding this array. Oh, that wasn't very wise of me. So I'm just going to expand it. My fingers hit a few keys that they shouldn't have. I even hit a comma twice, and I'm going to get rid of that extra comma. And so at this point, I didn't count how many key taps I made. I just want to know how many values are in this array. So I'm just going to echo, and I'm going to use double quotation marks so I can just use my interpolation. And then I'm going to say p tag array numbers is size, and I can just say something like count. Okay, well, this won't actually work. So I just realized this won't work because count is a function and interpolation really only works with actual variables. So I'm going to have to do this a bit differently. So I'm going to close my p tag just the same. And then I'm going to take this out because this is the function that gets the size of the array. So I'm just going to declare a variable because I can declare these whenever I want. And I'm going to say size is equal to, and then I'm calling a function, some PHP function called count, and I'm passing in my array as a parameter. And what will happen is that this function is going to go ahead and count all of these, whatever number that is, and then whenever it's finished that operation, it's going to assign it to the variable size. So when I want to print that the array numbers is size, then I can just print the value that comes from the variable size. And so when I refresh once again, then I see, oh my, I have a little error here. So we're getting an error about an undefined variable, and that's because I'm saying number here. So that's good. We have our first PHP error where it's showing us that we have some unidentified variable on line 23. So we know exactly where to look and what we are looking for. So the error is that I have the array as numbers and I'm referencing number. So I just add an S there, fix that, and there we go. So now I have 20 values inside my array. And if you look at this closely, remember that we started off with this being 10. All right, now it's 101. Why is it 101? Because, well, I changed the 10 to 101. So it's just looking in position 5 and bringing back whatever value it sees. That's how this array subscript thing works. Now, what if I wanted to print out everything in this array, every value, without actually writing the subscripts manually? So if it was 5, then maybe writing it manually would be fun. Maybe 10, okay, you could bear through it. But then I have 20 and I really don't want to sit down and write echo numbers 1, echoes numbers 2, well, starting from 0 up until, well, 19. So I can actually use a loop, and this is where we start seeing how our loops are actually useful. And I can say for and declare some counter and initialize it to 0. Then I say count is less than, and we just got the size of the array. So I can say where the count starting from 0, which we know is the initial subscript of any array, we can do something until it exceeds the size of the array, and we just got the size of the array. So we can just say count is less than size, and then count plus plus. And then for the action, what we want to do is echo, and I'm going to use my interpolation once again, and we want to echo the variable numbers. But here's a twist. I'm not going to hard code the subscripts like I did here, because here I hard coded 5 and here I hard coded 9. So those are never going to change. But what I want this to do is dynamically go through this array from the first to the last and present me the value. So I can actually use a variable here in the subscripts because the variable can contain a comparable value. All right, so I'm just going to inject the counter, which is the variable count right here as a subscript, because it starts from 0 and it goes to 1, then 2, then 3, until it is no longer less than the entire size of the array. And that's how you start putting the pieces together. All right, so when I do this, it will just echo, echo, echo until it finishes the for loop. And by that time, we should have printed out everything inside of the array. So I'm going to put these in p tags just to make sure that they render absolutely perfectly to our HTML. And then we're going to refresh this page. And then we see it's printing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 through 9. And then we start getting those crazy numbers that I had entered at some point. So the fact is, using a for loop, we can easily traverse and print out what is in this specialized storage construct called an array.